Whole gang's here. It's the On Friar podcast, joining you on a Thursday afternoon, and was already been a eventful offseason for the San Diego Padres. What else would you expect? Hey, Tucupita Marcano is back. Nelson Cruz has retired. Big news on this Thursday. Not to mention some other topics that have gotten people talking. We'll be sure to get to that. Derek Togerson, Todd Strain, Darnay Trip. Always glad to be with you if you're watching on the on our live stream on YouTube. Be sure to hit the chat, and we will get to your comments. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate you listening as always, and appreciate all that OGs does for the On Friar podcast for over 30 years. OGs has been crafting award-winning microbrews with over 60 medals in international, national, and regional competitions. OGs is one of the most decorated breweries in the world, with each OGs location having 12 proprietary OGs brews on tap. They're constantly updating their menu as they did this year. You can take advantage of OG's loyalty program as well. It's super easy. You can do it online and earn loyalty points, rewards, and exclusive offers, all of which leads to fun and free food. And ordering online from OG's, it's now easier than ever. You get OG's delivered straight to your door. Without further ado, the walk-up music. Good to be with you, as always. The On Friar podcast, brought to you by NBC 7. Always a pleasure to be joined by Derek Togerson, Todd Strain. I'm Darnay Trip. What's going on, fellas? How are you?
There we go. I was waiting until the 2-minute mark so you can hear somebody other than Darnay. Boom, 2 minutes right on the nose. But we're doing well. How are you?
I'm all good. Padre City, baby.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. Coming off the World Series, Rangers wrapping things up. Bruce Bochy getting his 4th ring. Some interesting comments, I should say, from Ron Fowler to the San Diego Union Tribune as it relates to Bruce Bochy. And then obviously the big news from Wednesday about a $50 million loan, and obviously the ongoing managerial search. Derek, what strikes your fancy?
Boch, dude. It's all about, I saw a headline somewhere said, could he be the greatest manager of all time? And I'd have a really hard time arguing against that. I mean, it's hard to, when you're talking about different genres and different times. I mean, Connie Mack, all the rings that he won, and then the Leo DeRozier's, like you go Walter Alston, you go Bobby Cox. I mean, how many guys have had so much success? But when you look at what Boch has done in this across different eras of baseball, free agency, develop and draft, going to a different organization. I mean, first year in this organization, taking a team that lost 100 games 2 years ago and winning a World Series with it, all the success they had on the road in this postseason, just what he does, man. It's like he's got this magic touch. So, I mean, good on him and I loved every time I ever talked to him when he was at the Padres as the skipper here. For the couple of years I got to cover him when I first got to San Diego. Could not be happier for that guy. He absolutely deserves it. And he was already a first ballot Hall of Famer. And now I think he goes to the very top of the class when it comes to skippers who are enshrined in Cooperstown.
Yeah, what jumps out to me about Bochy is he does it with all different types of baseball players and front office execs, different temperaments, different types of players, different genres of players from different age groups, and they all say the same thing. They all love how he treats them. They all respect him, which is so key, especially when we're here in San Diego and just saw a season go off the rails because of behind-the-scenes stuff. Whether you're on the Giants, the Padres, or the Rangers, every player and every person in that organization has respect for Bochy, and he gives them respect. And that's really important. And obviously, that's a huge key to his success.
So wily old vet's getting it done too. I mean, obviously we've seen Dusty Baker do it. with all that has changed in the game or seems to be changing in the game, and how we use information and just how we managed our players and this and that, what does it say that it's Bruce Bochy coming into this situation with Texas? That wasn't necessarily a home run. I mean, they were spending, but I don't know how many people went in the season saying, yeah, Texas, that's going to be your World Series champ. And this is what they do. I mean, what does that say, especially as we enter into another search for a manager? I think in sports, we tend to kind of try and jump to conclusions. Like, what did we learn from this? And again, how it applies to Bruce Bochy. I mean, as Derek said, like, this is not just any ordinary veteran manager. This is a guy that's done it as well as anybody. But I'm just kind of curious what the lesson is from that, seeing these seasoned guys get it done rather than these kind of young up and coming types that might have kind of a new wave look on things.
Well, one thing is, who's the general manager of the Texas Rangers? It's Chris Young, who was in 2006, the last Padres pitcher to win a playoff game until 2020 came around. He was an all-star for the Padres, and he, of course, was managed by Bruce Bochy. He has a great relationship with Bruce Bochy. So when he was able to call Boch and say, hey, man, I want you down here. I think this is something that's going to be mutually beneficial for us. And Boch did it. It shows you how important the relationship between general manager and manager truly is. I think that's a lesson that we take from this and apply it to the Padres. AJ has to find somebody who's not only a great skipper, but he gets along with and is on the same page with. Because other than that, I mean, it's really hard to win if you do not have everybody in lockstep, especially when it comes to the GM and the skipper.
We've talked a lot, you guys, recently about how the MLB playoffs have kind of they've changed from what they were for nearly 100 years as like a resemblance of the regular season to how they're kind of a crapshoot and you never know what's going to happen. And it's really two different seasons. But one thing that has been consistent in the Major League Baseball playoffs the last few years, as they've morphed into this different kind of beast that they are, is a consistent, level, even-handed manager. You saw Bochy this year, Dusty Baker previously, Dave Roberts. These are guys that are pretty level-headed, value relationships within the organization and relationships with their player and respect. I think they're not hotheads. They're not young guys that are, analytics crazy. They balance both, and they're level-headed and even-headed and respected. And I think that's pretty interesting considering the change that the baseball playoffs on the field have undergone.
Todd, that's a good point, because there are no more Larry Boas, right? Guys who are just going to come MF you up and down and throw chairs and punch walls and go crazy. Like, when's the last time we had one of those types of managers in Major League Baseball? I can't remember like who truly the last one of those, like, flip over a table in the lunchroom kind of guys. Well, Lou Piniella, maybe. You just don't see those types of managers anymore. Everything nowadays is much more about relationships and understanding, and not just like they lose their stuff on umpires, obviously, but I really don't hear all that much about guys who are just, demonstrative in the clubhouse anymore. Do you?
No. And from a media perspective, Derek and Darnay, we could use a few more of those guys. They spice up our lives. Who's the Padres have the guy who threw the iconic fit in the minor leagues? He's one
Philip Wellman. He was AAA manager this year at El Paso. And I said this on the radio on Monday with iHeart, our friends over at AM 760. I really hope they talk to Philip Wellman about the major league job, because my God, how glorious would his ejections be?
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. It's funny, Todd, talking about, level-headed, respected managers. It felt like you were describing Bob Melvin there. Now, maybe not the get along with everybody piece, because clearly there was some friction that was too much to overcome. But it's funny hearing you say all that when that's like exactly what we said about Bob Melvin on this very podcast, like exactly 2 years ago, and it didn't quite work. And Derek, talking about finding somebody that AJ Preller can work with, like a respected manager, a good manager that AJ Preller can work with. I guess my worry is, are those two things mutually exclusive? Am I saying that right? Like, can we have both?
You can have both. I think. I hope.
We haven't yet.
I don't know. We have no evidence to prove that. I mean, you have guys he gets along with in Jace Tingler, and we have good managers in Bob Melvin. We haven't found the combination of those two things yet.
He didn't get along with Jace Tingler.
He and Jace Tingler were friends. Let's go with that. Maybe they didn't get along in a professional sense. Compared to Bob Melvin, he got along with Jace Tingler.
Yeah, so it's just, trying to figure out like who the right guy is for AJ. Obviously continues to be a tough thing to kind of pin down.
Let me ask you this. Does AJ even know? Do you think he even knows who he can get along with? What kind of person he can get along with in this regard? Does he even know what kind of personality traits he needs?
I don't know. I mean, whenever they hire somebody and he's on the podium with them, he's gonna sell it pretty well, just as he did with Jace, just as he did with Bob Melvin. I wasn't around for AJ Green, but he's gonna be pretty convincing, or as convincing as he can be, about this being the right fit and somebody that they feel aligned with and all that. But we keep ending up in kind of the same situation. And so I'm curious how that person looks, because again, he had that pre-existing relationship with Jace Tingler, but it had been a little while since he'd worked directly with him. And so when you think about Ryan Flaherty, when you think about Mike Schilt, as we've said, those guys have been in the building. Schilt has obviously done it before. He's managed playoff teams. And so I think that's why he seems like he kind of checks a lot of those boxes. But with those two seeming to be the leaders in the clubhouse, so to speak, it does give you kind of a different profile of manager. And maybe that experience is something that I'm sure we'd hear about if AJ Preller is introducing them as the new manager. That experience together being an asset and being something that he feels can help them kind of be unified and kind of on the same page for an extended period of time.
Todd, take it away.
Well, I have no idea who AJ Preller likes. You hear those two names, Schilt and Flaherty, but as you mentioned, like, judging by the past hires, I don't know who he can get along with for an extended period of time, because your relationship with your manager changes once he becomes your manager. So I don't know who AJ Preller likes, but I'll tell you who the fans like. I was out to dinner last night in between the 6 and 11. I hopped down to Old Town, and I was watching the last outs of the World Series with some friends of mine sitting by me. And you know who the guys who are hardcore baseball fans and Padre fans, who they liked at the table next to me?
Will Venable.
One guy said, "Hey, I really like Benji Hill." And all the other guys said, "Yeah, that would be great. Let's go outside the organization." Now, of course, it's Benji Gill, but they want Benji Hill. So any of those guys, Benji Gill, Benji Hill, Flaherty, Schilt, who knows? Who knows who's going to work with AJ? I'm out of answers.
I just did a Google search. I don't see a Benji Hill as an actual person. So at least not one that of any renown. I was talking to Roberto Costanares, our photojournalist who listens to the On Friar podcast consistently. So Roberto, thank you for always throwing ideas at us. And we came up with something that'd be totally fun, because we're thinking, and this is purely from a selfish media standpoint, but how about Ricky Henderson as the Padres manager? Because, man, how much fun would just talking to that dude on a daily basis be? It would be a gold mine for us here, us TV and podcast and radio types. That would be awesome. Now, I have no idea if Ricky would ever be a good skipper. I guarantee you he's not going to even be considered or interviewed for the job. But, man, wouldn't that be awesome to have Ricky representing Ricky to come in and be the Padres skipper?
It'd be like the Coach Prime experience, but Padres version.
Yeah, because nobody can deny he knows the game. And he probably knows the game better than anybody else you're going to talk to when it comes to the inner workings of baseball.
I remember we joked, like, who would Jace Tingler beat in a sprint? I haven't seen Ricky in a little while, but it seems like whenever you see him, that guy's in fantastic shape. Like, he
looks like he can still play.
Would he beat his guys in like a triathlon or some sort of like, CrossFit competition or something like that? Because he always looks like he could get back out there. Maybe those guys were confusing Benji Gill and Benny Hill. Maybe there's some sort of
there you go.
I don't know. Hey, a silver lining, if the Padres hire, stay with me here on this one. If the Padres hire Ricky Henderson, that might help their financial shortcomings because he doesn't cash checks. Boom.
I know. I was killing this story earlier, right? Remember when Ricky Henderson was playing for the San Diego Surf Dogs back in the old independent Golden Baseball League? He had already been retired or got out of Major League Baseball for a couple of years. So I went and did a nice long interview with him. And your Hall of Fame clock starts after you play your last Major League game. If you go back into it again after a couple of years, it resets again. So Ricky probably wouldn't get signed by a Major League team again. So I said, all right, it's 3 years from now. You're about to have your Hall of Fame induction because obviously you're a first ballot guy, but you're still playing for the Surf Dogs. So there's a baseball game that day because it happens in July. What do? Do you play the baseball game or do you go to your Hall of Fame induction ceremony? And he very thoughtfully took a second and said, you know what? As great an honor as going into the Hall of Fame would be, if there's a baseball game to play that day, Ricky's playing a baseball game that day. And I said, you know what? You're the coolest damn dude I've ever met in my life. Because he was so heartfelt and sincere about that. Like, he will never turn down the chance to go play a baseball game. And you give me somebody like that who just loves it to that extent in an organization, it can only do you well, right?
And one of the few people that can get away with talking about themselves in the third person and it not seeming weird because it's Ricky Henderson. I do. Obviously, we need to get to the loan piece. But before we go too far down the road of the managerial search or otherwise, I'm sure you guys saw the quotes from Ron Fowler in the UT today.
I did not.
This is from Bochy's agent, Tony Atanasio, said, quote, Ron Fowler wanted Bruce Bochy very, very badly. This is back in 2021 before they hired Bob Melvin. This from Fowler. Tony being Bochy's agent, Tony knew that I could only make a recommendation to the Padres as I no longer had a management role. And I did strongly recommend to AJ and Peter in separate calls that they interview Boch. Don't believe they ever contacted him. And as they say, the rest is history.
How do you not contact him?
Whatever can go wrong for the Padres recently is pretty much going wrong. I mean, these quotes, like the day after Bochy wins a World Series and on top of everything that's going on with the Padres, it doesn't paint a pretty picture. Bochy's agent getting loose too, man.
And Fowler too. I mean, Ron Fowler as well. Like, I mean, buds with Peter Seidler as far as we know. Yeah. And, you know, we've talked about him kind of being the firmer hand in the past.
Yeah.
To come out and say this, I think is really, really interesting. His agent said, Melvin is a wonderful guy, knows baseball well, but he's a calm, almost laissez-faire type guy where Boch is calm and he's mellow, but you don't piss him off.
That's Boch.
And maybe Melvin was a little too mellow, and there was that mid-September, fire and brimstone speech that seemed to get them on track in 2022, but clearly a lot was allowed to happen in the last season without things kind of getting, situated. And
Ron Fowler in the immediate days after Padre season ends is just soundbite gold, man. I mean, if you're ever going to talk to interview Ron Fowler, you want to get him in the moments right after the season ends. You're going to get something good.
You know what that screams to me is AJ doesn't care about franchise history. He only wants to write his own. Bruce Bochy's a tremendous skipper. You're talking about, you've got a guy who won 3 World Series in 5 years, and you don't even call him a guy who has obviously strong ties to this organization, who has been the only one other than Tim Flannery who has been with the club in some capacity as a player and or a coach / manager to both of the Padres World Series teams. He's loved in this town. Even though he did win 3 World Series for the Giants, everyone looks at it here like the ownership did him wrong. They sent him out of town. He didn't leave on purpose to go there. He is loved in this town, and you do not even talk to him. And remember what just happened in 2021. They had a historic collapse at the end of that season. I mean, it was something that you needed somebody who had a steady hand, who was a known commodity with the stars you had in that room to be able to right the ship. Bruce Bochy didn't check those boxes. He wrote the boxes down on the paper because they're him. And you don't even talk to him. If that report is true of what Ron and Bochy's agent are saying, what the hell is wrong with you? You call the man, even if it's a cursory, even if you don't ever intend to hire him, you hear him out. You owe him that because of what he's meant to the game. How little respect for the game do you have, AJ?
On the flip side, I agree with you, Derek. They should have contacted him. There was probably no way Bochy was coming here with Preller still in
It doesn't
charge.
matter. You talk to him.
I know.
It's a problem. I know. To Texas. But
I know.
CY called and he got him on the phone. He got him in the room and he convinced him.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder how much both parties knew like this wasn't going to be a fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You talk to him. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe your perception is wrong. Maybe he's dying to come back to San Diego. You don't know. You didn't freaking talk to him.
I mean, I agree with you, Derek.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer to make that call. But I think AJ wants things done a certain way, and I'm guessing Bruce is the same, and he had a comfort level with Chris Young that he didn't get a chance to vet out with AJ Preller. I'm sure he has some understanding of how things work in the system, and it's unfortunate. One thing I've wondered, now that they are in this search is, having, again, you guys have followed them and covered them longer than I have, but having been through the last 2 rounds of managerial searches, and Jay Stingler comes around and like, don't know who this guy is, but understand his history with AJ, and that could be meaningful. There's all the talk about communication and relationship building and all that didn't work out. Bob Melvin, of course, you feel good about the prospect of Bob Melvin. I just don't know how optimistic I can get about anybody. Is that unfair? Am I overreacting here? It just feels like it's going to be a tough sell when you've seen things go south the last 2 rounds and in a hurry, and you enter into it with like some reason for optimism. I guess I now go into this one thinking like, I hope it works out. I genuinely hope for the organization, for the fans, that it works out. It's just going to be tougher to sell it on me, and I would think the fan base, than it was in the past because of the way things have gone.
Yeah, you're not being overly dramatic here. You're right on. It's hard to get excited about anybody because, I mean, I go back to all the way to Buddy Black getting hired, right? And Buddy Black was a better skipper than his record indicates. Buddy Black was the skipper of the year in 2010 with a roster that really had no business going to the final game of the season with the Giants and winning 90 games. And they gave him, a bunch of nonsense. They traded away Adrian Gonzalez after that. That was in the days of we never pay anybody anything. So he really had a bunch of nonsense to deal with. I thought he was, again, a better manager than people gave him credit for. Since then, it's been the interim of Pat Murphy. What are you doing? Andy Green was, he was a 2-time Southern Conference Manager of the Year. He was a kind of an up-and-coming thing. He was just talked to by the Cleveland Guardians for their managerial job. He's got something there, but it just didn't work out for whatever reason here. And then Rod Barajas got a cup of coffee real fast. But then you go with Jace Tingler. Like, obviously, he wasn't ready or equipped to have the job. And you go with Bob Melvin. So you've run the gamut, right? The college guy who might be the new fresh voice, the up-and-coming, known commodity in the minor leagues who didn't work out, the kind of out of left field kind of, this is our hard charging, real diehard guy who's been on the backfields of the Rangers organization, who's now ready to take over that leadership role. That didn't work out. Go to a guy who is one of the most successful skippers in the game today. That doesn't work out. Like, you've kind of hit every type of manager you're going to find, and none of them have worked. So what gives us hope that is there a different style, a different type? Is there a different, prototype that we haven't found yet that might work?
No matter what anyone says at this upcoming Padre manager press conference, no matter what the manager who's hired says, no matter what AJ Preller says, no matter if they seemingly win the press conference, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they say. Any Padre fan worth their salt won't put any credence into those words, won't put any credence into things they hope to achieve, how they're going to work together. No one will believe it or buy into it who's a smart Padre fan until the 2 parties involved, Preller and his manager, play it out and make it happen and show that they can work together successfully for an extended period of time. because you can't just keep winning press conferences because that rings hollow because your actions have shown otherwise the past few years and past few hires.
Also,
Yeah.
who saw Austin Hedges getting a ring before Manny Machado? Who saw that happen?
And Travis Jankowski. Oh man. As far as the search goes, I mean, there's Benny Hill, obviously. Apparently Eric Chavez was briefly in the mix. Doesn't appear to be so anymore. We know about Schilt. We know about Flaherty. Sounds like there's talks with Phil Nevin. I don't know if any of this is like necessarily a surprise, especially Benji Gill was the guy that had been floated around, and he makes a lot of sense.
I
But
like that idea a lot.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I like that idea a lot. I mean, look at what we need with this club. And we've seen the last couple of years. He's somebody who handles superstars well. Obviously, he had Randy Arozarena with Team Mexico in the World Baseball Classic. He made that team probably play better than the collection of its parts. Took them all the way to the championship of that WBC when they really had no business beating some of the teams that they beat. He just seems like he's a local guy. He seems like he has both that knowledge of the game, but also how to relate to players to get the most out of them. Like his in-game decision-making is, by most reports, pretty good. Like he's a guy who was kind of mostly an unknown commodity because he didn't have the extensive big league managerial experience. But he just seems like he's just like ready to take that step, like Jace Tingler did not seem ready to take that step. Andy Green did not seem ready to take that step. This Benji seems like he's ready to take that step. Like this is the guy who you get and he turns into Bobby Cox and he's here for 20 years. He has that kind of feel to him to me.
Does Benji Gill know how to button his jersey over a shirt and tie or a sport coat? Just asking.
There's only one way to find out, Todd.
Okay.
I think Bob properly executed it with the Padres, but a bit of a flub there with the Giants.
Big misstep.
Well, that's an ugly uniform with the Giants. Let's be honest. Nobody really wants to wear that stupid thing.
True. At least they didn't give him the City Connects. Those are even worse. Yeah, I mean, Derek actually sounds like he's ready to go all in on Benji Gill. We were just talking about how it's going to be hard to be convinced about any of those guys, but that sounds like a guy that you could get behind.
That's a guy I could get behind. Get behind him. I could get behind Mike Schilt because, again, the resume. I'd have trouble getting behind Ryan Flaherty. I'd certainly probably take a guy like Benji Gill ahead of Flaherty just because he kind of has that like I'm an AJ puppet feel. And do we trust AJ to be able to run not just an organization, but the everyday, day-to-day, pitch-by-pitch operations of a Major League Baseball team? I don't get that feel at all in that situation.
Is he an AJ and a Manny Machado puppet? I think that could cause some. I mean, when we're already dealing with clubhouse issues, and you have a manager that seems pretty aligned with one of the stars, and a lot has been written about Manny Machado and his leadership style and this and that. I mean, I don't know that necessarily helps you avoid any potential issues either. I might be overstating that, but something that I think you would have to kind of consider.
Yeah, the optics are bad there. Like if you give that guy the job and half the clubhouse already feels like, oh, well, Manny's really the de facto skipper here.
100%. That the Flaherty hire would raise the most eyebrows, I think, inside the locker room, within baseball, and within Padre fan nation. I think that would be the most. I don't know if this is the right hire.
It sounds like, Derek, your pecking order with those three guys would be Schilt, Gill, Flaherty. Is that fair?
Yeah, Schilt, Gill, Ricky, Flaherty.
And then Flaherty.
Yeah.
I probably agree with you on that one. I would probably be unanimous there.
And throw Venable in there too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious when do you think we get this thing wrapped up? GM's meetings next week? Do you think it's in place then?
It's possible if they truly have been talking to a bunch of guys during the World Series here, because they've been doing their rounds of internal interviews. They should have a pretty good idea at this point, right?
Yeah, and it's like, how many guys externally are they really going to talk to? I mean, if they've already spoken to 2 or 3 of them, and the thought going in was it was likely Schilt or Flaherty, it doesn't seem like a 20 or 2019 or 2021 situation where it's a broader, selection of out of house guys that they need to spend a little more time talking to.
You're swimming in a smaller pool this time.
Smaller pool, yeah. And you mentioned Gill and Tingler. I mean, I remember trying to figure out who Jay Stingler was. Whereas there is not that exercise to the same degree with Benji Gill. I mean, there's familiarity.
Jay Stingler, I thought, was something you got at Victoria's Secret. I had to look it up. I didn't know who that was at all.
Yeah, be careful Googling that.
Yes. So I don't know. We will wait and see. The other big story is, Padres taking out this $50 million loan, and a report from The Athletic, $50 million in September to address short-term cash flow issues that meet their obligations, including player payroll. It sounds like this is the type of thing that does happen from time to time. It's not exclusive to the Padres. Derek, something or nothing?
Probably nothing. It's not completely nothing, but my guess is, it looks like the exact amount that they're missing from the Bally Sports, Diamond Sports thing going away. So obviously their subscription thing with MLB did not work out. So that, I think it's actually a much bigger question for next year, is how are they going to make up for that revenue in a year from now? Will it be the subscription model? Can they find another broadcast partner? That's going to be the interesting part, is what happens moving forward. This one here is probably not all that big of a deal, because you can, in your next contract with whoever you do it with, you can probably get that money back, repay the loan, and you're off and running. You don't have to worry about it that much. So yeah, you're right. It does happen from time to time with different big league clubs. Now, I think what it does, they're not going to go bankrupt or anything like that. But I do think it absolutely means, if you look at the domino and the trickle-down effect, they need to trim payroll, and they need to trim payroll in a bad way. And that brings us to, who can they get rid of? That means, is it make it much more difficult to pick up the options on Waka and Martinez? Does it give you the ability to sign a guy like Seth Lugo back? And of course, you know where I'm going with this. Do you have to trade Juan Soto now? Can you afford $29-30 million for one guy if you're in this kind of financial situation?
Yeah, it's not rare for MLB teams to carry debt. It's a little bit strange that the Padres are carrying such an extraordinary amount of debt. It's not rare for MLB teams to get loans like this. But as Derek said, this is a precursor for cutting salary. There were rumors of it. There were reports of it. This is just another indication that the Padres, either by their own choosing or by the strong hand of Major League Baseball, are going to have to trim salary. And if you're trimming salary from roughly 250 down to 200, you're talking big chunks. That's a hard number to get to if you really want to get down to 200 without taking away some players that have been in San Diego for a while, are famous in San Diego, and are big names. So it'll be very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And, they come off a playoff run, and they, continue to ramp up their payroll with the thought that they're going to be able to make some money off playoff gate again, and watch parties and that sort of thing. And so I think that's, that's part of this as well. Now, they're taking out 50 million. It sounds like they kicked tires on 100 million, and Major League Baseball was like, let's just keep it to 50. Now, would they have been able to accrue, that number, through postseason gate and this and that, the increased revenue that comes with that? I don't know. But it's interesting. And from the payroll standpoint, I think between what they did last year and then a season where they had 60 plus sellouts, it gave them some idea of what they could max out, in terms of revenue, how much money they could make, which then in turn tells you how much money you can spend while avoiding this sort of thing. And as our friend and colleague Rafa points out, there's that word sustainability that got thrown out a bunch, during spring training and all that we kind of scoffed at. But this seems to indicate that they are now figuring out exactly what sustainability looks like for the San Diego Padres, at least this version of them that's trying to spend as much as they can in pursuit of a World Series and has a very captive fan base.
Well, super teams are sustainable in San Diego. Super payrolls are not. The Braves are a super team, right? Their payroll this year was $200 million. They've been around that for a long time, and they're the betting favorites already to win next year. The Braves are a super team. They don't have more than a $200 million payroll. So yes, super teams are sustainable in San Diego if you do it the right way. Spending willy-nilly like they've done the last year or two, that's not sustainable here. And again, God bless them, credit to them for going after it and trying it and going in all in this year. Now they're going to have to take a step back and figure out how to make this all work.
And probably not sustainable if you don't make the postseason on the regular, and probably not sustainable unless they find a way to replace that estimated $60 million a year from the regional sports network, the Valley Sports Network. MLB backfilled most of that payment this year. They are not going to be backfilling that. That's $60 million basically going away unless you supplement that with your own advertising on your own broadcast. But no playoff baseball, no Valley, $60 million a year. That doesn't mean a sustainability for a high payroll. But as Derek said, from a Padre fan perspective, heck yeah, go for it some years. Spend money. The team went all in financially. They thought they were going to spend big bucks at a record number, and they thought they had the team to win the World Series. It would have been worth it. No matter the loans you take off, what any Padre fan would tell you, if this team was in the World Series, it would be worth it, and we're all for it. Go big. Go all in. We want that world title.
Yeah, 100%. And, when you're looking at the big contracts that they handed out last year, and you're thinking about Manny Machado as a 39 and 40-year-old and Xander Bogaerts, the 40 and 41-year-old, it's like, well, that's fine. They might be paying them some exorbitant amount of money at that point, but you've got a World Series or two in the bag, and that's okay. And so at this point, maybe not so confident in that being the outcome, but to your point, you admire their willingness to cut the big checks and go for it, and now they're kind of having to learn and figure out what they can get away with on a long-term basis. And as Derek says, I mean, Juan Soto is the big question mark, right? And does this make you feel more or less confident? Does it sway you in either direction in terms of their ability to keep him around beyond next year and come to terms on a mega deal at some point in the next year, if not this offseason?
Scott Boras is not going to let that happen. And we've talked about this. We know he's taking Soto to free agency. You can talk about, oh, yeah, we're going to try and get an extension done. It's not getting done. All right. Boras and Soto will not allow that to happen. They want Ohtani to see what he gets this year so he can reset the free agent market. And then they're going to go after something similar to that. They're not doing anything until they know what kind of contract structure they're dealing with after next year. They are going to free agency. So you have one of two things. And then after that, it's what, $450, something like that. They can't pay that with the other contracts they have on the books unless they trade away a couple of those contracts. So no, this is either Juan Soto's last year in San Diego and you let it roll and you try to get that last pennant race out of him, or he gets traded before spring training. Those are the only two options you have at this point. And honestly, I don't know which is better for this club right now. My gut tells me it's trade him, because you can get so many more pieces. You can get some clubhouse stability. Maybe get everybody else pulling in the same direction. It's something. Plus, you've still got plenty left in this lineup without Juan Soto. He was obviously the standout. Manny was hurt. Tatis figuring things out. Bogaerts was hurt most of the year. Ha-Seong Kim became a revelation. Jake Cronenworth did not hit whatsoever. That might even be a worse contract for them right now if he doesn't figure it out. But you've got places you can go in this lineup. He's not the only thing. So my guess is he's probably going to get dealt because that's your biggest financial chip right now.
Yeah, you can convince me either way with Soto. Let's keep him around and go for it, which as a Padre fan is always a good thing I want to hear. The prudent thing is if you're really planning long-term for organizational success and financial feasibility, then you want to deal him, and you want to deal him now, because Boras is taking him to market for probably what will be the second biggest contract in baseball history, I would guess, maybe behind Ohtani. So,
yeah.
Will he reach Trout at 425? That's going to be hard to do.
Yeah, but revenues are going up. Baseball owns the streaming market. I don't know. You're right. It's hard to reach that thing, but every time we say salaries can't go higher, they go higher.
Yeah. Plus he's 20. He's entering his year 25 season. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
And you're obviously way better when you have a player of Juan Soto's ilk. But I mean, Diamondbacks didn't have a Juan Soto. This wasn't a star-studded lineup.
Nope.
Rangers had, Garcia obviously had an incredible offseason or postseason, I should say. Seager was out of his mind in the World Series. Semien, like they've got some guys, but it's not like up and down the lineup. Just one star after star. It was a mix of kind of high-profile guys and some young guys that stepped in and really contributed. And so, Derek, like you said, it's not like the cupboard's bare if you don't have Juan Soto. And if anything, you should be deeper than they were, and that you have a chance to kind of address one of those weaknesses. And without Juan Soto, there is a pathway there, perhaps for like a young guy like a Jackson Merrill to establish himself, because you don't have a big name. Then with the big name, there's obviously the productivity, but maybe some of the demands and that sort of thing that come with it, kind of holding down one of those spots. I think one of the lessons from this year is like there maybe needs to be a little bit more flexibility, variability within this lineup, like room for some of these young guys, opportunity for some of these young guys, rather than just like, we need these 4 guys to contribute, and if they don't, then we are hosed.
Ha-Seong Kim really came into his own. Do you look at dealing him?
Oh yeah, you did bring this up last week, and you brought it up at the buzzer, and we didn't have a chance to discuss. And so,
yeah, I mean, no, it sucks saying it. Believe me, it sucks. It sucks saying it. He's gonna make $8 million this year. It's the last year of his contract. He's due a big contract. Look at the WAR numbers. He's always only getting better. He's elite defensively at 3 different positions. He's hitting enough to make himself a top 5 WAR player in the National League. Are you going to be able to keep him beyond this year? Can you, if the finances are like they are now, it moves Jay Cronenworth back to his natural second base, where he actually has value given his contract, not putting him at first base, or he's fairly way overvalued if you put him over there, given his production. I mean, God, I can't believe I'm actually saying all this, but that might be something they legitimately have to consider. Even though I love the guy, your defense becomes a lot worse without him at multiple positions. He's loved in the clubhouse. It would suck, but it's something, if you're in this kind of financial straits, it's something you legitimately have to think about, because you can get 4 guys back for him.
Yeah, to me, I agree with you. What you said makes perfect sense. For me, I would prefer moving Cronenworth, because if you can somehow keep Ha-Seong Kim and then re-sign him, you have position flexibility with your middle infielders if Bogaerts continues to deteriorate. And I think Kim has a higher upside than Cronenworth. And then you can find some pop. I mean, I know you want to move Cronenworth to second base, but to me, if you can move Cronenworth and keep Kim long-term, that's a better play than dealing Kim. But moving Cronenworth is not easy, dude.
Yeah, that's a pure salary dump, and you're selling him for 30 cents on the dollar. And the other question is, who's going to take that contract? You got to attach some serious prospect capital or pay a lot of it. And if you're paying a lot of it, it defeats the purpose of making the move in the first place.
I have one place where he can go. He's an attachment to any Soto deal. If you want Soto, you got to take Cronenworth.
That does diminish the amount you get back for Soto, but it does give you a lot more financial flexibility, and it might allow you to keep Kim for a while. Can you use the franchise tag on Kim? Is that possible?
They should have attached him to Bob Melvin. They should have attached he or Matt Carpenter to Bob Melvin. That's what they should have done. You can have Bob, but you're taking one of these ugly contracts out of our hands.
That's genius. I love it. That's the best idea we've ever had on the On Friar podcast.
I don't know. For anything in return.
It's the Kim thing is just such a drag, because Derek, you make a compelling case for it, and obviously, like, through gritted teeth, nobody would want to do this.
Oh, nobody wants to trade Ha-Seong Kim. Yeah. Nobody wants to have to trade Juan Soto, but you kind of have to do things you don't want to do sometimes to make things fit in this business.
But like, it makes sense for Juan Soto because of the amount of money that he's going to demand, and he's just swimming in a different pool from Ha-Seong Kim. Like, you could probably figure out a Ha-Seong Kim deal, especially if you're not trying to work out a Juan Soto deal. Juan Soto's one of those guys that's kind of in their own stratosphere, but there's obviously the fan base and the clubhouse part of it. Trading Ha-Seong Kim would also be an admission of guilt and wrongdoing by AJ Preller, would it not? Because you're only trading him because you put yourself in this position by way of the Cronenworth, say Darvish, Bogarts type deals.
No. You're doing you're doing anything you can to improve the organization, Darnay. You're making the organization deeper in that situation.
Sorry,
that's how you spin that, and that's how they would spin that. It's hey, we look at everything. We don't say no to anything. We're open to all ideas, and this was something that we think is going to make the organization better in the long run. Remember, the goal is not to compete in 2024; is to compete for 5-6 years, a decade after that. It's the standard line that they keep going with.
And to improve your team, you get rid of your war leader. That's naturally what you do.
Yeah, precisely. When is Ethan Solis ready?
No Hassan Kim makes Petco Park a lot less fun. That's for sure.
A lot less fun. The team as a whole. Yeah, that would be a mega drag. Anything else before we wrap up? I feel like we hit on a lot of the big notes. It just seems like it's been a quiet pursuit of this new manager. No real surprises in the first week since the wheels kind of got turning. But I'm sure there'll be a bonus episode here at some point in the next week or so when something happens.
One thing that interests me is if this managerial search drags on for past the winter meetings or longer than that, that signifies to me maybe a little more instability within the organization and maybe a lack of clarity on their candidates, which is not a good sign. After all they've gone through, and as you guys mentioned, they've already talked to all these in-house guys and talked to some out-of-house guys. I said outhouse guys. Outhouse guys. I mean, what more do you need to say? As Derek said, if this drags on, that's just another sign to me of organizational. Like, what's going on, dudes? Come on.
Well, it's either they can't find what they're looking for. They've gone Bono and they still haven't found what they're looking for. Or they found people and those guys don't want the job.
Yeah.
So and neither one of those things is a good look. You like to have your skipper in place before the GM meetings. If for no other reason you avoid all the questions about when are you going to hire a new manager.
Absolutely. And this seems to be a AJ show. I'm curious, AJ talks about how collaborative everything is. I wonder how collaborative this search really is after everything that transpired. It feels very much like, certainly more so in the past, that this is Preller's deal.
Well, if AJ goes down to Old Town Mexican Cafe, he'll get plenty of collaboration from everyone there.
Well, after 2 years, every Padres manager ends up being an outhouse guy, as we know, and hopefully that's not the case this time around. Any final thoughts?
Andy Green got 4.
That's true. Andy Green's doing a lot of work as far as AJ Preller's managerial record, because that 4 makes the numbers look maybe not quite as bad as they have. But anywho, any final thoughts, Derek, Todd, before we wrap it up?
No, I want this to get over with so we can start, chirping and moaning or lauding whatever decision they make on the manager front. It's just, this is that kind of scary time now where you're like, oh man, God, I just don't know about this. Because now you're talking about trust to be able to make the right decision. And we just haven't been able to see, we all were 100% sold on Bob Melvin being the right decision until it turns out that he wasn't, because it didn't work. So now it's like, as you said before, is anybody the right decision? Or is the only right decision in finding someone else to be in the general manager role or hiring the managers? It's hard. It's hard to know exactly where the truth lies in this. And that's a little bit terrifying.
It seems like in past years, the managerial search, that was like the big thing that we were like excited about, but most intrigued by. Whereas this year, it just seems like get through that, and then we can get to like the Soto stuff and the roster stuff, because to me, that seems the most compelling. Whoever's in that chair is like, whatever, we'll see if it works. But will they have Juan Soto? Probably won't have Blake Snell. Will they have Waka or Lugo or Ha-Sung Kim or what have you? It feels weird, but I find myself just kind of like, all right, gloss over the managerial search, whoever it is, we'll figure it out. But there's some real serious roster questions that they've got to answer in the next coming months.
And if the Padres need to ever raise some extra cash, they could just open a concession stand at Petco Park. It's a good way to get some extra money.
Yeah, but do you know where it's going?
It's going to the secret Padre coffers.
Appreciate
you know
it, guys.
they're even a real company.
Yeah. Goodness. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be with you next week or whenever they hire a new manager. See you, everybody.
Hire Ricky.